Hey you guys, Kraig here, and welcome to a GameMaker Studio 2 tutorial. This is part of our series on inventory. In this video, we're going to be drawing our inventory to the screen in kind of a basic way. I'm going to leave it up to you guys to figure out exactly how you want to style your inventory, but the point of this is to show you how you would go about approaching that in the first place. We're going to try to get it drawing down the left-hand side of the screen, and we're going to be able to toggle it with the tab key to flip it on and off. If you haven't seen the first video in this series, you're probably going to want to go back and watch that. Your inventory won't make much sense if you haven't seen that. We have some code in the player already in the create and in this collision event with our object collectible, and we set all those objects up. So if you don't have that stuff, you can follow along, but it'll make more sense if you've done that. Speaking of that first video, I discovered a small bug as I was filming this one. I went back and I posted a pinned comment on that video. But I just wanted to bring your attention to it. Make sure that the code looks this way in your collision with the Object Collectible event for your player. Specifically, we were using DSMap add for everything before, whereas we should have been using DSMap replace if it was an item that we've seen before. The reason is DSMap add actually doesn't overwrite the value in the map. It only adds. If you want to override it, you have to use the replace method. And that's a little confusing because in other languages, maps usually have one put method that will both add or replace things, but it's not so in GameMaker. So yeah, just make sure that your code looks like this. In the little show message thing, I updated it to actually look the value up out of the DS map because I realized it's not much of a test if you're just reusing your local variable. You actually want to see what went into your map. So yeah, this is how that code should look. Now let's go ahead and get into the content of this video. We want to draw our inventory to the screen. We want to be able to toggle it on and off. So there's a few things we have to do. First, we're in our create event here. We want to update this to have two new variables. So the first one is actually going to be a DS list. Now, if you haven't used a DS list before, it's very straightforward. It's like an array that can dynamically resize under the hood. It's just what it sounds like. It's a list of things that you can add to and you can look things up out of. Let's go ahead and call that inventory items. And that's going to be created with DS list create. And now you're probably wondering, like, okay, why do we have inventory and inventory items? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, the reason is, to draw all of the things in our inventory, we need to loop through them. The problem is DS maps don't provide a nice way of looping through. I kind of wish GameMaker would update that. Like, it doesn't. There are many languages where you can easily get the keys or the values from a map, and it's fairly efficient. It doesn't go doing weird slow lookups the whole time. Anyways, GameMaker needs to update some of these data structures. But in order to efficiently loop through things, we're going to use a list that's going to store all of our object indexes, and then we're going to look up out of the map by object index. So maps, they have a number of find functions. The only one that's fast is when you're finding by a key. That should just be constant time. Boom, here's your key back. Or here's the value for your key. But if you're trying to find the first and then find the thing after that, find the thing after that, that's slow. Especially if you have a large inventory and you're trying to look that stuff up every time you go to draw to screen, you're going to slow your game down quite a lot. So we have to add a list, unfortunately. The other thing we need to add is a Boolean that is just going to keep track of whether our inventory should be or shouldn't be showing. So it's just a little toggle. We'll call it should show inventory. We'll start with that being false. So it's not going to show the inventory by default. You have to press tab to have it show up. So let's actually go ahead and add that right away. We'll get rid of the toggling, take care of it right away. We'll do a key pressed if, where's our tab? Probably under others, others, tab. So key press tab. Description here is toggle showing inventory. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to say should show inventory equals not should show inventory. So if this was true to begin with, it's going to flip to false. If it was false, it's going to get flipped to true. So yeah, you hit tab, shows your inventory, it was showing and stopped showing it. Now we are going to go into our collision with Object Collectible. And this is where we're going to make sure that that list contains all of the object indexes that we care about. Because of that code where we can see if we already have an item in inventory, we have an easy way of determining whether we should add it to the list or not. We don't want to add duplicates to the list, so we're not going to add anything if we've already seen the item. So only when we haven't seen the item, down here in this else block, we're going to say ds list add. That is our inventory items list that we're adding to, and we're going to add the key. That is the object index, once again, right here. And now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. We're going to come into a draw event, and we're going to draw inventory to screen. Oops. There we go. So the first thing we want to do in any draw event, well, not 100% of the time, but most of the time, you want to say draw self. And this is because when you implement the draw event, it overwrites whatever the default used to be. And the default, it's going to draw itself. If you forget to say that, it's going to stop drawing your player to the screen. This is a very common bug. People are like, oh, my player stopped drawing. Well, probably forgot to say draw self. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to throw in this if right away, and we're going to check that toggle. So if should show inventory, we're going to show the inventory. And if not, we're not going to do a thing. So if should show inventory, there's basically, I guess, two things we want to do for each item. Again, you don't have to do it exactly this way, but I think this would look kind of neat. You want to draw the sprite, and then you want to put the number of those items that you have next to it. And I want it to kind of go row by row down the left-hand side of the screen. So we're gonna loop through everything in our inventory, and we're gonna do that. So to loop through, the first thing we wanna do is figure out how many items we need to loop through. So we're gonna just make a local variable here, call it len, short for length, and that is equal to the size of our list. Inventory items. So this should be holding one entry for each item we have, each unique item, each object index. So we're going to loop through each of those. We're going to go ahead and put together a little for loop. It goes from 0 to len minus 1 because our list is 0 index, just like an array. And the first thing we need to do is grab our key out of the list. So our key equals ds list find value. That is coming from inventory items. And that is going to be the item at position I. So we got our key. Now we're going to get our value. And this is the part where we look up from our map. So ds map find value. This is the only fast find function in a map. It's coming from our inventory map. We're going to use that key. That's going to tell us how many of those items we currently have on hand. The next bit we're going to do, you may or may not have to do depending on how your game is set up. If you are using a camera and views, you're going to need to do this. If you aren't, you can just skip over this bit and use the raw values that come after. You won't need to know the camera X and Y. But if you are, like I am, speaking of which, I made a video using this project actually to demonstrate cameras and how those work. You should check that out. If you're using a camera, you basically need to add the camera's position to whatever position you want to draw at. That way it puts it in the correct spot relative to the camera in the room. So it's pretty easy to get your camera coordinates. You just look up your camera. So in the draw event, there will be one camera active at a time. So you can say camera get active, just, make sure to spell camera correctly. Oops, geez Louise. And then you can grab the X and Y using a couple other camera functions. So get view X and cam Y, camera get view Y. There. So once you have those, you can go ahead and draw your sprite and draw some text. So the sprite, first, we're going to say draw sprite. That is going to be the sprite object get sprite. We're going to give it the object index. It so happens that our key is the object index, so it's very simple. You just give it the key. The next thing you want to do is, so the subimage is just 0. There is only that one subimage. Now you're going to give it an X and a Y. So the X is going to be pretty straightforward. If you're in your room and you want it on the left hand side, it's just 0. Because we need to do it relative to the camera, it's just cam X. And then the Y, we want it to start up at the top with 0 and then work its way down with each row. So a pretty easy way to do that is figure out what you want your pixel offset to be. So let's make a local variable here, and we'll call that just grid. This is going to be the size of the grid in the room. Here, if we take a look, we open it up. Each of these squares is 32 pixels, so that's what I'm representing with this object. Basically, I want it to move down one of those grid squares with every item. So the way that we're going to do that is say cam Y. This is kind of our top. 0 if you're not using a camera, it's just the top of the room. And we're going to add I times grid. And that will, with every loop, every time I increments, move us down. So there, we've got our sprite. Now we want to draw a little text. That is going to be at cam X once again. And the Y is going to be the same as the Y for our sprite. So cam Y plus I times grid. And actually, I did forget something. In our X, if we just leave it at cam X, it's going to draw our text on top of our sprite. So we want to scooch it over just a little bit. So maybe we add grid to that as well to kind of whoop. And then the string, I want it to print a colon with a space followed by use the string function here to turn a number into a string for printing. It's going to be followed by the value, so how many of those things that we have. So the way this should look is it'll, say we pick up a sword, it's going to draw the sword, colon, and then it's going to say 1 or however many we have of those. Let me just check here. Oh, we're getting a couple errors up here with the camera. I forgot to pass it that cam argument because it needs to know what camera it's getting the X and the Y for. That's why we had to look up the camera in the first place. So yes, this code looks good, but we'll find out when we actually run it. All right, so here we are in the game. Pick up a potion. It says we have 1 of them. We hit tab. Looks like we have 1 potion in our inventory. And we're gonna pick up a sword. It says we have 1. Look at that. We've got 1 sword, and we pick up our second. We have 2 swords. So there you go. That's a pretty simple, just easy way of drawing your inventory to screen. You can toggle it on and off. And I think for you guys with your own projects, you could think of having other toggles. Like let's say you want it to show up when you check things and sort of fade out if you haven't touched your inventory in a while. You can implement that using this toggle mechanism as well, and like an alarm or something. If you want it to draw across the bottom of the screen, you just change the position that you're drawing the sprite and the text at. If you want it to make a bar sort of like Minecraft right on the bottom of your screen, you could put like a little rectangle around your sprite and then lay them out side by side. So it's really got a lot to do with just what are the X and the Y that you feed into that draw sprite and draw text function. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, any suggestions or things you'd like to see, throw that in the comments as well. Yeah, I just appreciate you being here, and I'll see you in the next one.